Blog Talk Radio.
Welcome to Sasquatch Watch Radio with your host, Billy Willard, and the Blog Squatcher. Strap in, hold on tight, get ready, because it is about to go down.
Welcome everyone to another episode of Sasquatch Watch Radio. Today is August 24th, 2009. I am your host, Billy Willard, and I am sad to say that DB, the Blog Squatcher, will not be joining us tonight as he is trying to give some assistance to his wife who is currently sick. So, DB, I hope you're able to nurse her back to health. We will have a special co-host joining us very shortly. He hasn't arrived yet, but we will get him on the moment he arrives. He's probably on his way to home from work. But, so we don't have any news tonight, as we typically do when DB's around. But what I will do is I will introduce our guest, and let me give you a brief synopsis of our guest here, Mr. Scott Marlowe. Scott Marlowe has studied education at Polk Community College and majored in the social sciences at Rollins College. He spent 2 summers in the early 1970s in Europe studying art and design with the Cochrane Group and attended the 1977 summer design program at Harvard School of Continuing Education. Between educational assignments, Scott traveled the world extensively pursuing paleontology, archaeology, and cultural disciplines. His extensive field work experience gave his academic understanding considerable depth and a strong appreciation of practical, hands-on instruction in combination with conventional classroom learning. Now, this I found interesting because he used to be in my neck of the woods. Scott began teaching in 1978, and his first teaching position was instructing art and design in the adult education program for Fairfax County, Virginia, at Thomas Edison High School. By 1980, Scott was teaching design at the Northern Virginia Community College at Loudoun County campus. I know exactly where all those areas are because I work there pretty much on a daily basis. So anyway, as everyone knows, Scott is part of the Pangea Institute. Pangea Institute can be found at www.pangeaninstitute.us. And that's
Pangea.
Pangea Institute. That's P-A-N-G.
No N there.
Okay, P-A-N-G-E-A, and then the word institute.us. So, Scott, welcome to the program.
And I'm very happy to be here. Thanks for the invite.
You are quite welcome, and we're glad to have you on. So we have a lot of new folks, actually, Scott, that listen to this show. We get new listeners pretty much every Monday night that we come on the air, so I'm sure there's a lot of folks in this chat room right now that may know who you are, may not know who you are. So just give them a rundown of what you're currently doing and what your interest is in the subject.
Well, I've been doing cryptozoology now since my sophomore year in college when I had my own sighting of my big hairy friend. And of course, I kept my mouth shut. At that time, I was pre-med. And wound up not pursuing a medical career, but didn't really want everybody to think I was a flying nutcase. So like everybody else, I really kept my big mouth shut, and I probably should have kept it that way. At least some of my colleagues out there in crypto world seem to think I should have. But when I retired and started doing things with Pangea Institute, it became evident at that stage that the research I'd been doing into cryptid animals for 35 years. At that point, I had something to add and something to say, so I decided to go public, which is when I designed a course that was originally intended for Pangea on cryptozoology that we would teach online through our academy. But I took it down to the college where my kids were going, Florida Keys Community College, showed it to the continuing ed director down there, and next thing I know, I'm teaching it at the college as an online class, so that we'd reach a much larger market than just Monroe County, since it was a community college. And of course, Lauren recognized it as one of the top stories in 2004, and the next thing I know, we're winning awards from the American Primate Conservation Alliance, Chester's group in Texas, and some other people, and it really put Pangea on the map. So,
right.
Things have been an uphill and a downhill struggle, as it is with anything, but now we're doing a heck of a lot of TV. And so things have developed enormously well, and I'm pretty pleased with the way it's come. And actually, in a microcosm, my partners at Pangea, associates at Pangea, were a little bit concerned about my mentioning my extracurricular activities at first. And we played it straight, and it took Pangea quite a while to get off the ground. And then finally they said, well, we got nothing to lose. Go ahead. And next thing we know, Pangea is on everybody's lips worldwide, and our website's being hit by 156 countries, and we got over 1 million web viewers every year, and it's just amazing, what it's done.
That's great. That's good. Well, I think our special guest co-host has arrived, Mr. Eric Altman. Say hello to Mr. Scott Marlowe.
Hey, how you doing tonight?
Hey, Eric, it's nice to finally meet you and hear your voice. I've heard a lot about you.
Well, thank you, Scott. It's nice to finally meet you as well. I've heard a lot about you as well. Sorry I'm late. Just getting home from work, and traffic was terrible tonight for some reason.
Been there, done
maybe maybe somebody hit a Bigfoot. You didn't look?
I could be so lucky, but no. No, it's the orange. It's those typical orange barrels and cones.
Oh, okay.
Uh-oh.
Yeah.
Sounds like you found a big pothole.
Yeah, he's probably in one of those potholes, hiding somewhere.
Yep.
Well, that's great. Thanks for joining in with us, Eric. We're going to keep an eye on the chat room. Eric, I didn't know if you had that up or not.
I'm pulling it up right now.
Okay.
So I'll keep an eye out for you while you guys discuss.
Right. Everybody knows in the chat room, if you have a question for Scott, please put it in all caps. It makes it easier for us to spot it if you put it all in capital letters when you're wanting to ask a question. And then, of course, you're also free to just call in, and the call-in number is area code 347-237-5070. For all those who may be wanting to write that down, I'll repeat it. It is 347-237-5070. Yeah, Scott, it was really funny as I was reading your bio on the site. I never realized that you were right here in Northern Virginia there.
My dad passed away about 10 years ago, but my mom still lives up there in Rockville. So actually Silver Spring now. We moved her out of Rockville, but not a mile away, but she's in Silver Spring. And so I know the area up there really well, and grew up there since about 1959. So
so you're pretty much aware. You're probably pretty well aware of the there's a nice watershed up there in Maryland.
Oh yes,
it supplies water to Rockville.
Mm-hmm.
Some pretty, you don't think of Maryland as an area that's got a lot of wooded forested areas, but I tell you what, there's some areas out there that'll really surprise you. Well,
you get up around Frederick, you got plenty.
Oh yeah.
And we used to ski when I was younger, and we'd go up towards Round Top, and there's plenty of woods going up that way, even off the highways. And you've got Southern Springs, which is Pennsylvania, and Round Top. My goodness, there's a lot of them. So we get up there. Frederick's really nice, but a lot of people don't realize just north of there is Camp David, and that's heavily wooded, that area.
Mm-hmm.
So it's fun up that way.
Yeah, it's nice mountainous areas up that way. Eric, is there any questions rolling in there before I get on to my line of questioning?
Yeah, I did see one. Finally got into the chat room. This comes from, let's see, Babette Bombshell asks, Scott, what are your thoughts on the Myaka ape photos, or skunk ape photos?
God, why is it I'm always asked that question? I mean, how many times do I have to give the same answer? It's a bloomin' orangutan, if it's anything at all. It could be a cardboard cutout for all I know. But I know what's pictured there is an orangutan. There's no question about it.
Right. Yeah, I think we recently saw you discussing monkeys on the Monster Quest show on the History Channel just, I think it was a couple weeks ago.
Well, actually, it's apes, but yeah, we were talking about escaped chimps, and actually, at just about the week before, it was the week before that aired, I was actually in California, and one of the reasons why I went, I had to go for one of the movie outfits I work with, but one of the reasons why I went there was I wanted to get up into the San Bernardino Mountains and check things out and see if I could find any sign of Mo, the one chimp that escaped there. And I went to the same area where the lady that was on the show that I didn't know anything about at the time had her sighting, and I was surprised because there are some signs that Mo is alive and well, and about an hour closer to L.A. now than he was when he escaped. So more than likely, if anybody's having their trash raided in the middle of the night, Mo's responsible. But
that was a real interesting story, actually. That you're talking about the hiker lady, that lady that was hiking.
Yes.
Yeah. That was pretty interesting.
And I can understand, a lot of people who are in the zoo business and dealing with exotics like chimps not wanting to go on camera and alert their insurance company that there's a problem. But these animals can most assuredly survive in the wild, and it was amazing they couldn't get anybody besides me to go on camera and say so.
Right.
But we don't have an axe to grind there, so or an insurance company to placate, so we can get away with saying things that others might not want to do.
Right. Eric, you got any more questions rolling through?
Yeah, our good buddy Bill Green wants to know, Scott, are you currently investigating any sighting reports, Bigfoot tracks, any sounds, anything like that?
Hey, Billy, nice to hear from you. Yes, I am. I'm doing several things at the moment. Bigfoot, or the swamp ape more correctly put, as I'm sure everybody knows by now, I don't think that the classic Bigfoot Sasquatch is the same thing as our Bigfoot swamp ape down here in Florida. I think they're totally different animals. But I'm doing work on him or her or their family and their relatives. I just finished wrapping up a story for Mysteries Magazine that'll be in the next edition, and I understand it's going to be the cover story, on a local lake monster legend here. And I'm working on several other things that I right at the moment can't discuss. But we always stay busy. And there's no question about it, but we're getting more and more involved in television. Actually, though I appeared in front of the camera in 2 of the episodes of this season's Monster Quest, was supposed to be in a third, but we had some last-minute stuff, which is typically Hollywood, and they're going to reserve the footage that we shot and use that in a future episode. But I helped them research about 6 different shows this year, and I'm looking forward to and hoping that they tap me to do it again, because it has been a real pleasure. The producer that got me involved with Josh Gates has written me from Arizona and is asking me to consult with him on a show that they're going to do in Europe, not for Destination Truth, but for a different producer. So I'm kind of involved in that. I'm working with ABC on a project, and I mean it's gone pretty crazy of late. Dealing with this, and of course, I was on Is It Real with Chuck Nice, and actually that's the show I'm most excited about because they, for whatever reason, they're always contrasting me with Dave Shealy, that is, and I was a little interested in the outcome of that show. Right. So the most exciting thing, of course, from my perspective, is the hair sample that my students and I collected while we were out on one of our field studies. I turned it over to their producers, and actually, they weren't aware I was going to do it. And then they took it to UCLA to have it tested by a forensic hair specialist, and the hair sample came back as definitely animal, but not a known North American species of any kind.
Ain't we used to that?
Yeah, we're kind of used to it, but the neat thing is, of course, nobody's saying that it's a swamp ape. Nobody's saying, anything other than it's an animal that is not known among the North American fauna. But you know something, that in and of itself, particularly when you take that in tune with the Monster Quest episodes, a pretty interesting thing. They are going to conduct some DNA tests on it, I understand. I'd be interested to see what's going to come out of that, because they theoretically can now extract DNA from hair if it hasn't been corrupted in any way, without having the follicle. So that might be a very interesting thing. But, we got, and they're talking about exotics. Let me bring this up. I mean, I think it was day before yesterday, we had a cable repair guy down in Hollywood, Florida, who was bitten by a green mamba, paralyzed on one side of his body. Fortunately, they got to him with antivenom in time, saved his life, but the mamba got away, and nobody knows where it is. And, of course, big news down here is, the governor signed into law, a python hunt, because, they've become such a problem down here. I mean, Florida's a hotbed for these exotics, and they're all over the place.
Oh, yeah. Yeah, they did a show on that, too, I know. You guys have these things crawling around everywhere. You brought up an interesting point, though, about the hair. We had just had this discussion, actually, during the last show. Wouldn't it be interesting if we were able to take all the hair samples that have been analyzed and came back with that same result and check them together to see if there's any similar characteristics? Oh,
it'd be wonderful. It'd be wonderful. It should be done. I think Henner had Wolf Henner Fehrenbach had some hair that they said were claiming was the gold standard for Sasquatch. I don't know. I don't think that held up. But if it did, and Dr. Meldrum may be able to shed some light on that. I would love to contrast the two, because the medulla in the hair sample that I gave Chuck was enormous compared to what you ordinarily see, and the corona was very, very narrow. So, in terms of optical, examination, which anybody can pretty much do with a strong enough microscope, that comes back interesting. And I thought that the fact that the scaling pattern was unusual was also very, very intriguing.
Right.
So,
all right.
I hope that answers Bill's question.
Okay. Yep, I'm sure it does. Don't worry, he'll have more.
I'm sure he writes me frequently. So.
Yeah.
Go for it.
We've got a couple more questions.
Yeah.
Right.
From the chat room. One from Corey asks, Scott, what's your opinion on the theory that a Sasquatch might look different depending on what part of the country that it's in, size-wise, coloring, etc.?
It might look different from a different area of the country. Well, yeah, I mean, that would make sense because obviously if it's, in a mountainous area, there are certain things that it might or might not do on the basis of the geography that might impact it. One of the things that I've pointed out with the size of the feet, which seems to be what everybody focuses on, is there's a really good biological reason for the feet to be so big. The animal is fairly massive. Most people claim it's taller than a human, although I have my doubts about some of those claims. But it tends to hunch forward a little bit if you watch, for example, Patty walking in the Patterson-Gimlin film. Not to bring up a sore subject. But in any case, when it does that, there has to be some support on the ground for it to be able to do that, and it requires a larger foot. So that adaptation is pretty cool. If you look at the swamp ape tracks that appear to be genuine, which I have several that the State Museum gave me, and some others that appear to be genuine of Bigfoot that have been taken up in the Pacific Northwest, those tracks are very, very different. And I discussed some of that on a Ripley's Oddcast, where I'm holding a North American, or Pacific Northwest Bigfoot track Unfortunately, they didn't let me do the swamp ape track too. But you can kind of see some of these enormous differences. Most of the other tracks I've seen are obvious fakes, and most people realize they've been cut out of wood and carved a little bit and that kind of nonsense. But I think Ford did something like that with the Honey Island Swamp Monster. But in any case, those types of tracks are usually pretty easy to spot. I mean, the classic Yowie track that I keep getting from Oceania and Australia is clearly a carved track. But the number of tracks that keep coming in, and I think Jeff's got an enormous collection of them. There are some really, really good ones that make a lot of anatomical sense. And just from the differences in the track, you can tell you're not looking at the same animal, or if you are, that the foot is heavily adapted based on terrain.
Right. Very interesting. What else you got there, Eric?
We get different hair colors too. Some are even reported to be white, like the so-called abominable snowman, or a very, very light gray, and some are brown, some are Irish setter red, some are black. So, that could also be partially adaptive. And our swamp ape down here in terms of size appears to be about a foot to a foot and a half shorter than the classic Sasquatch.
Yeah, we get a lot of reports of gray-silver color here in Virginia.
Yeah.
So,
and again, that could be a partial adaptation of some kind, and until we actually find them and observe them and what's going on, it's hard to say what the reasons might be. And I'm not a really super big one for idle speculation, but based on other animal populations, we can see. I mean, the silver color to some degree may be related to the silverback issue of the gorilla.
Right.
As they get older, the males tend to go that color. So there could be a number of different reasons that would explain it, in addition to camouflage. So it's really hard to say.
Yeah, I've thought that many times myself. I mean, the gray-silver, I'm sure you know this, you've been in Virginia. A lot of the tree bark out here has got that gray-silver tinge to it.
Yeah.
So, I mean, if you had one of these things standing beside a tree or just barreling behind the tree, you would have to really put your eyes right on it to spot it.
Well, and that might be true in Colorado with the aspen too. So, I mean, there's a number of different reasons why that would tend to develop.
Right. Okay, Eric, it's your floor again.
I got a bunch of questions here. This one comes from, I just lost it. Don't you love that scrolling? Okay, from Slam360, wants to know, do you think the Bigfoot and swamp ape are related? And I'll ask you a second question real quick, because this one's kind of a good one. This comes from Crypto Seeker, wants to know, Scott, can Carol Ann have your autograph?
I don't know. Why would anybody want my autograph? I mean, geez. If somebody wants it that badly, sure. But I mean, it's not like I'm Josh Gates. God, he's a heck of a guy. I really enjoyed working with Josh. But anyway, by the way, that episode was supposed to air on the 9th. It's going to air on the 23rd if anybody wants to watch. That should be a good episode. But in any case, let's put it this way. Based on what I've done so far and the observations that I've had, I personally would speculate, with some educated speculation, that the classic Bigfoot Sasquatch is not the same species and may very well not even be the same genus of animal that the swamp ape is.
Right.
My personal feeling is that the swamp ape descended from the line of apes that originated, or that we find the Deiropithecus on, or Dryopithecus, and there may be something, although I'm not 100% sure, that Bigfoot is actually related to the Gigantopithecus, but it may have come from that line.
Right.
Jeff and I kind of differ a little bit on that issue.
Right.
But and Dr. Krantz. But there are a number of possibilities there. They've found some new ape species in China and what have you that might tend to work that way. If we know that the Shiva-pithecus went into Asia, and some of these new things, the taxonomy is not completely set yet, so it's hard to say whether we wound up getting them because they went two different directions. The family went two different directions or not.
Right.
It's too soon to say.
Yeah. Your floor again, Eric.
That's all the questions we have for right now.
Okay.
Oh, goodness,
right.
You said we had a lot. I was getting kind of worried there.
Just mostly banter about John Cartwright's autograph, but other than that, no, we're good for Bigfoot questions for the moment.
Okay. Okay, good deal. All right. Now, one thing I like to really get into, Scott, is I like to discuss theories. I mean, because let's face it, a lot of what we know is theory. And I just like to really touch on that because I'm very interested to hear everyone's different opinions on this. So I'm going to ask you basically a series of opinions on some of the common theories that you hear in the Bigfoot world and see what you think. Stick structures. Do you think these creatures construct stick structures?
Yes, I think they're perfectly capable of it because they're more intelligent than chimps and gorillas in that regard, or orangs. And I've seen some evidence, that suggests to me that they're a little bit more capable than just building ground nests. However, some of the things that people have been touting as stick structures, I'm not sure of. I've seen similar things in Europe that have been caused by what amounts to be like little mini tornadoes or downdrafts, and loose or very wet soil, and the trees tend to lean in, and it creates this sort of a look. On the other hand, I've seen some things that, to me, look very suspiciously like they have been constructed, and there's probably a way we can find out if we had enough people out there who are trained where these really massive structures I've seen, photographs of, would know how to use an anhydrine or luminol or blue star in order to ascertain whether they have, the wood has been handled by anything.
Mm-hmm.
That's the same stuff they used to do fingerprints and that kind of thing, or to see if a biologic has touched something. However, I don't recommend anybody go running off somewhere and buy this stuff because while the TV shows are really good about showing it in a spray bottle, just spray it all over the place like Windex, it's not going to kill you. That isn't true. Some of that stuff, and if not the stuff, the solvent that they put it in will definitely kill you if you breathe it in. So you don't or at least cause a lot of damage. So it's not something that someone who is untrained and without a biosuit should be messing with.
Right. Now here's an opinion. Here's one that you're going to like. They want to know, what is your theory on John Cartwright being the world's greatest Bigfooter?
I wouldn't know. Not in a position to comment.
See, you got to learn. So you're supposed to say yes. He's the world's the greatest Bigfooter. It's like he's paying everybody to say this.
Well, now if you asked me if some guy named Dwyer or another one named Witten were, I'd have an opinion.
Oh, goodness sakes. He had to go there.
I don't think I want to go there.
Oh, goodness. I think Eric's got some more questions scrolling in.
Uh-oh.
Yes, I do. Let's see. Slam630 wants to know, are there more types in the USA besides Bigfoot and swamp ape, or just those two types? Or just those two?
Those are the two that are pretty obviously a different issue. Whether there's more or not remains to be seen, and how related they are remains to be seen. I do not think that some of the ones found elsewhere in the world are necessarily the same.
Okay.
All right.
From Corey, he asks, would a Sasquatch build a structure, though, for an animal that seems to be all about hiding? Why leave such an obvious sign of habitation?
Well, that all depends on how far back in the netherworld you go. There's places up in Idaho, I know for a fact, that people don't tend to go, so they could pretty much do whatever they want. But obviously structures are not exceptionally good for nomadic lifestyle. But then again, Plains Indians had no trouble with teepees, did they? Or other types of lodges. So, I tend to think that some of these things are so closely related to humans that any behavior you see in us or in the great apes is likely to be emulated or possible.
All right.
All right, and the last one that I've seen comes from Good Going, wants to know, Scott, do you think Bigfoot and Sasquatch are the same animal?
Well, let me clarify the semantics. Today, the word Bigfoot, I mean, you're even seeing it used in Southeast Asia to describe the Mawa, to see it applied in Australia to describe gosh darn it, Yowie. Boy, I'm having senior moments more often. I guess it's because I'm getting more senior. I've heard it even used to describe a Yeti. So it's really now a catch-all phrase or a catch-all term that applies to any bipedal, hairy, primate, regardless of, or primate like man-ape or what have you. That regardless of its height, regardless of its locality, et cetera, it's a descriptive, catch-all. Whereas I think Sasquatch is more descriptive of a particular locale, as would Oma, as would Buckwa, as would swamp ape, be applied, and thus is a more specific animal. For example, to put it in our terms, human means a Homo sapien, obviously, but there are several types, and there are many different types of nationalities and races. So I think that's a pretty good analogy.
Right. So in talking, since we mentioned that, do you think this thing is more animal or is it more human?
It's probably, I mean, if you're going to put it that way, it probably leans more towards human. Certainly the intelligence is much closer to us. But there are some animal aspects of it, and throughout history it's been depicted that way, although, I've never heard of any of these things killing their fellow Bigfoot for no reason.
Right.
Not doing it for sport.
Right.
So, I mean, this is going to sound awfully arrogant, and I know all of my friends out there with the pop guns are going to get all over me, and if I get hate mail, so be it. But in some respects, I think they're more civilized than we are.
I think I see another question there.
Uh-oh. I figured I'd touch off a firestorm with that one.
This is actually a very common question that we get a lot, so we'll let Scott answer that one, Eric.
This comes from Poison, wants to know, why do you think we haven't caught one yet?
Probably because they're very, very smart, and I'm not so sure that we haven't. There's a number of accounts, some of them very, very good, that suggest we did, or at least came in contact with something that could be described as a Bigfoot, and I'm not all that certain yet that some of these things are not a case of mistaken identity. I'm sure everybody knows about the Mexican wolf boy, and we've all heard the story about Zena, covered with hair, etc. And I'm sure at this point everybody's aware of what congenital hypertrichosis is. And it's possible these things could be some kind of human or a human that is still infected with what was apparently a normal condition for us before we evolved into what we are today. So my Russian colleagues, Igor and the rest of them, all seem to think that they're Neanderthals, or at least related to them. They may be right. I don't know.
Right.
What kills me is that the physical anthropologists cannot stand the thought of anything under the name human or in the Homo genus being depicted as anything less than a clean-shaven something or other that uses a Gillette Atron shaving cream every day. But that wasn't true, and it isn't true. They looked like a Bigfoot.
Right. Let's see. There's another one, Eric, from Irish Guy.
All right. Can you relate their apparent intelligence and their lack of technology, what with some 30,000 years of evolution or so?
Well, I'm not so sure about their technology. They may simply have rejected it because they don't need it, in order to survive. On the other hand, most of the European depictions of bipedal hairy primates throughout history do show them using clubs and some kinds of tools. It's certainly if a gorilla can use a stick in order to gauge the depth of water before crossing a stream, or a chimpanzee can use a tool in order to extract termites from a mound, these things should have and probably do have some technology. But why it is not a lithic technology and we find flint implements and things like that laying around, I don't know. But New World apes are theoretically not as intelligent as Old World apes. So, well, of course, there's no real New World apes in that sense. But, let's talk about monkeys, New World and Old World. I'm not, I know some South American species have been seen using, chunks of wood or rocks or whatever to crack open nuts, and certainly chimps do that in Africa. So, I'm not sure. And actually a stone that the chimpanzee is using to crack open a nut would be considered lithic technology. A block of wood to do the same thing, well, we're seeing culture there because it's not the same group, and then it's being taught to their young on how to do this. So therefore it is some kind of culture, but we're seeing some rudimentary issues. And, thank God for Jane Goodall, who opened our eyes to all of that.
Right.
So, the sheer fact that of course there is that group out there that thinks, they see Bigfoot coming out of the forest wearing a Spanish conquistador's hat, holding a box with flashing lights, and shouting, "Beam me up, Scotty." I don't buy that at all.
Right. Where'd that question go? Do you have that question that Poison asked? Yeah, I think Poison asked another question, Eric.
Yeah, Poison wants to know, Poison seems to think that a salt block would work better attracting Bigfoot than a scent or a sound. Has this been tried?
I don't know. I've never tried salt. We've tried the pheromone chips and have gotten virtually no advantage out of that or reaction to it here with the swamp ape. But then again, I don't really hold out a lot of hope for the pheromone chips anyway. I mean, just because a chimpanzee female pees on it doesn't necessarily mean that something closely related to us is going to do anything other than hold its nose and go, "What the hell is that?" So I don't know that the pheromone bits work unless it's from a closely related female of some kind.
Right.
But I'm not even sure that the call blasting works. I mean, for all we know, the calls that we're blasting could be, "Hey, don't go there. There's a bunch of humans over that way."
Right.
Other language. So I have my doubts as to the value. Just because a gibbon yells in the woods like some of the swamp ape calls, or some of the Bigfoot calls, or the Sasquatch calls that I've heard, doesn't necessarily mean they're saying the same thing. So right. All you can do is construct an experiment and try it, and if it works, great. Then the next step is it repeatable, and that's
right.
the scientific approach. So, as you gain more information, actually the problem of these things being as elusive as they apparently are should start to go away.
Right. We have a member at Sasquatch Watch of Virginia. He's a geologist, and he has thought many times and actually had discussions with the Washington National Zoo and the ape exhibit that they have. And he's talked to them, and he was discussing maybe putting out a selenium block, because he was saying that these greater apes, such as the lowland gorillas and such, need quite a bit of selenium when they're lactating. And he had an idea of maybe trying some type of a selenium block. And my understanding is you can actually find that.
Yeah. Well, I mean, selenium. We take selenium. I certainly do.
Right.
It's available in a tablet form, and it's actually good for a few things. So I don't know whether they'd be intelligent enough to have some idea. Well, certainly dogs and cats know some therapeutic value of herbs. That's why they eat grass and other things, because it helps settle their stomach. These things may also. I've heard some people say that garlic is an attractant to them. Well, there may be a couple of reasons. It may be a gastrointestinal issue, because I'm sure these things are infected with, gastrointestinal worms and other types of parasites. But garlic also is not too shabby. Of course, that could also explain why they reek. is not too shabby as a insect repellent.
Right. That's
you
right.
rub it on the skin, and that it tends to keep the some of the nastier bugs away. So, there may be, they may have. Let's not assume because they don't use tools they aren't intelligent.
Right. All right. Looks like we have our first caller. Let me get this caller on the line. Caller from the 936 area code. You're on the air.
Am I on the air?
Yes, you are.
How you doing this evening, Billy?
Doing just fine there, Smiter. How are you?
Oh, if I was doing any better, I couldn't stand myself.
Oh, my God.
No, I was just going to call in and comment to your guest that, they use everything that's out there in the woods, and I've talked to farmers and ranchers before that have had salt licks come up missing, brand new ones that they put out.
Well, I mean, I got into a whole lot of trouble when I went out to Chester's conference a couple of years ago because they had a nice panel discussion up there. And I sat around listening to everybody patting themselves on the back because they had put out corn in a deer feeder that was made out of stainless steel and was completely solid. And one of the animals had apparently ripped it to shreds to get at the corn. Of course, they're all sitting up there saying, "Hey, get a rifle, go out there, sit down, blow the thing away. Well, then we got our proof." Well, that's great, but if you can get it trained to the point that it's going after your corn, all you got to do is slip it a Mickey, and then you got a live one.
Right.
Yeah.
They didn't want to hear that, of course, and my name has been mud with the organizations out in central U.S. because I don't favor killing them. I think there's a much better way of expressing yourself and doing science a favor than bringing in a dead carcass. So, if that, again, generates a lot of hate mail, sorry, guys, but, I am definitely and firmly in the no-kill camp. You will not shake me on that. Billy, I hope that doesn't get you in a boatload of trouble.
No, hey, it's not going to get me in a boatload of trouble because I stand the same way with you. I am not seeking for this thing to be taken by force. There's other ways to study it, and I know it seems to be taking us darn forever, to get any, concrete proof. But hey, I couldn't imagine shooting something that looked so human.
Well, one of the things that we look at it in terms of our lifetime, and I've even had reporters and what have you, say, well, hey, you guys invented this thing back in the 1950s and 60s and yada yada. No, we didn't. The research I've done, part of which appears in Elementum Bestia, Craig Heiselman's book, shows that these bipedal hairy primates have been depicted since man first was able to write and draw cave pictures. So they've been around a very, very long time, and we haven't found one in that period of time. Again, I'm not sure. Why would anybody draw an imaginary creature on a cave wall when most everything else that they drew was real life something?
Right.
Why would that persist for 4,000 years plus? And in some cases, some of these carved images coming out of Russia are really taking me aback because they look more like a Bigfoot than they look like a Venus figurine.
Right.
So, what are we looking at? We assume we know, but you know something? It's just an assumption.
Right.
Any other questions? I just wanted to make one more comment about your talking about call blasting.
Yeah.
I've never tried that. What I tried was the sounds of a baby laughing.
Yeah.
And I got more interaction in the woods that night than anybody who's ever done any call blasting. I mean, I heard things moving all around me.
Well, and that would make a great deal more sense. What animal, what human can resist the sound of a baby? Of course, a predator is going to look at it as potential food. But if I want to bring in owls or I want to bring in a wolf or a coyote or whatever, what do I play? I play the sound of their prey.
Yeah, well, it wasn't a baby crying; it was a baby laughing.
Okay, well, again, that's fine because it's still a baby.
Yeah, it's something that would cause curiosity.
Well, it should. So, I think if you're going to call blast, you're going to have a lot more luck playing the sounds of what is likely to be the prey of these animals as opposed to trying to communicate with them.
Or something to heighten their curiosity.
Yes. Okay. That would probably work. And certainly makes sense. I mean, most hunters I know that go out there, what do they bring? They bring decoys, they bring duck calls, they bring rabbit calls. You've got these lovely little electronic things now that'll play virtually anything. So, I think those are great. I mean, I've gone out there with a injured cottontail sound that I've blasted all night long, and my God, I mean, it's like the woods were alive. Unfortunately, it didn't bring the swamp ape in so far as I know, although we certainly felt like we were being watched, but it did bring everything else known to man that was out there, including owls all over the place. So, it's just going to be essentially what you do. I mean, you want to bring in a shark, they're probably there. They may not be seen, but, boy, you put a drop of blood in the water, and they're all over the place.
Oh, yeah.
All right, Billy, well, thanks for taking my call. Just thought I'd throw my 2 cents in.
Yep, you're welcome. Thanks a lot.
All right, good
show. Any more questions in there, Eric?
Oh, yeah, there's been a lot of questions rolling through the chat room tonight. This comes from VABF Watcher and wants to know, Scott, your thoughts on the latest news release about a Bigfoot burial ground.
A Bigfoot burial ground. Boy, this sounds like a major setup. You're trying to get me in trouble with Lauren Coleman and John Johnson again.
That's the question. I'm just asking him.
Yeah, you danced around it well enough that I knew what was up. Let's put it this way. I don't completely rule it out, but I don't hold to the way it was released. I don't hold to the theory without doing the necessary research. I think it's an insult to the people involved. Until something solid and concrete develops, I just think the whole issue should be dropped, because I think all you got is a bunch of people trying to exploit the Bigfoot myth. And when I say myth, when I say myth, I'm putting it in quotes. So I don't think Bigfoot is a mythical creature at all. I think they're real. But I'm getting awful tired of everybody out there trying to sell a damn DVD by putting it on the back of somebody and calling it a bloomin' massacre.
I'd agree with you on that, Scott. Let's see. We got another question here. Scrolling through the chat room. I just saw it a few seconds ago. This chat room is hard to keep up with because it just keeps on scrolling.
Well, you got like almost 50 people in there.
Yeah. Yeah.
Well, if what I just said didn't aggravate the powers that be, and it doesn't start a tirade, then of course I'll know about that in the morning.
Yeah. Exactly.
Yeah, when you get up.
Yeah, well, it'll be all over Craptamundo.
This comes from Bill Green. He wants to know your thoughts on how Fox or how media like Fox News, etc., handles Bigfoot. That's one of Bill's favorite programs.
So in other words,
God.
In other words, Scott, go ahead and burn another bridge.
I'm not making these up. These are seriously asked questions.
Rupert Murdoch, where are you when I need you? Well, let's just say, their editorial slant comes into play on virtually every bit of coverage they do. And if you really want to start talking about playing something up for sensational value, bingo.
There you have it, Bill. I think that's about it for questions that I've seen, unless I missed something. I'm sure they'll put it back in the chat room, but I think that's it for now.
Oh, jeez. God, why do I feel like I've just had my baptism by fire? You guys really want me to walk through a minefield, don't you?
Oh, we got another one.
Oh, God.
Okay, go ahead.
Yeah, this is going to... You're like this one as well. Whammy9 would like to know, based on your answer to the question about the Bigfoot burial ground, why you had sent a letter to the DA asking for an investigation.
Well, that's an easy question to answer. Number one, the previous year, I got to go into the whole thing now. The previous year, M.K. Davis, much to the chagrin of everybody and to the consternation of parties that shall remain nameless, decided that Patty was a digger Indian, quote unquote, and came under a lot of fire for using the terminology. And sorry if that insults anybody, I don't mean it to, but the bottom line is, if it's a digger Indian or any kind of Indian for that matter, it's human. Got it? All right. Now you're saying on top of that, a little less than a year later, that there was a massacre, and I'm going to put that in quotes. All right. I was privy to these discoveries, if you can call them that. And if indeed any of it were true, and I had acted in any other way, I would have essentially concealed a crime. So rather than make the decision as to whether I'm going to do anything about it or not, the appropriate thing is to turn it over to the authorities. I did so. Now, I did it in a rather catty way, but I did it. And I deliberately sent the letter to the wrong one. I'm not so stupid as to send it to the correct one, because all I wanted to do was frighten off all the idiots that were trying to capitalize on that issue. And
Right.
If you'll recall, a year before that, somebody who again shall remain nameless got into a boatload of trouble in Texas for digging up a human skeleton and not reporting it. Capiche?
I wouldn't know who you're talking about.
Yes. Okay, so capiche? And what I did, if you bother to examine the history, is absolutely no different than what Hoovelmans and Sanderson did with the Minnesota Iceman. No different. They went to the authorities. The authorities notified the guy who had the Iceman at the time that they were en route. The Iceman disappears and shows up a couple of months later in a circus sideshow, an obvious fake.
Right.
So I did exactly what history had shown me was the correct thing to do and what the law dictated. And if people didn't like that, particularly the ones that are associated with that organization out on the West Coast, you know where you can plant my lips, or your lips.
Okay. We got a couple more questions, Billy. Should I just keep rolling with the questions, or would you like to take a call?
Right
or
Sounds like you got a few of them. You better go with them, or we're going to have a war on our hands. I'm not
All right,
you didn't throw out the gauntlet already.
Let's see here. Good Going wants to know, do you think there is a dog-faced Bigfoot, and if there is, could they be related to a Sasquatch?
Don't know. Now, there are some Ursidae or dog-faced type animals. Certainly my colleague Linda Godfrey can speak to that a lot. And Linda does, has told me that she kind of thinks that there's some sort of Bigfoot, and I'll accept what she says. You got the Skinwalker, which is of Navajo origin down in New Mexico in the American Southwest. You got some animals that fit that description up here in North Carolina and elsewhere. And certainly up there in Wisconsin and Michigan where Linda works. So not having seen one, not having seen a really good picture of one, it's hard to say. Could they have some sort of simian shelf issue? For those of you that don't know what that is, if you look at the inside of a chimpanzee or a gorilla mouth, there's a plate that sits up under the tongue that's called the simian shelf, which is what gives them that pronounced jaw. If there could be something going on there based on their lineage, that certainly might explain it. Other than that, I don't know.
Okay.
Okay. And a follow-up question about the DA question that came earlier. This is from Whammy again. Wanting to know, so just to clarify this for Whammy, what you did was file a false report so that you could shake people off the track. Just wants to be sure.
No, I didn't file a false report. I filed a report based on the facts that had been introduced and said basically that the authorities need to decide whether it's worth looking into the story or not to determine whether a crime had been committed or not. And it was entirely up to them to do so. That's all I said.
Okay. And that is it for the questions.
Okay. If anyone wants to call in, I'll mention the phone number because I always get complaints that I don't say the phone number enough. So, area code 347-237-5070. If you want to ask Scott a question, the phone number is 347-237-5070. All right. I'm going to get back to some of my questions. another theory that we hear discussed a lot in the Bigfoot world is the possibility of migration. Scott, do you think these creatures migrate?
Well, I'm almost certain that the swamp ape does. Whether Bigfoot does or not, I don't know. Probably, but not necessarily. I'm sure they're nomadic to the point that they go where the food is, and in that regard, yes, they migrate.
Okay. All right. And also, where do you think these things go? There's been thoughts that they could go underground or go in caverns. Where do you think these things go, to get completely out of sight? Do you just think they go into remote forests?
I just think they're really, really good at camouflage, and sometimes hiding in plain sight's the best way. But that may be what they're doing. I certainly don't think they wouldn't use caves. I mean, humans did, and in some cases still do. As far as our swamp ape disappearing into gator caves, I don't think so. But hey, maybe I'm wrong.
All right. I think I saw another question, Eric. I'll let you bring it on.
Okay. What is your opinion on Bigfoot being human or ape?
Well, I think we've already said that by saying it's either a man-ape or ape-man. It's a combination.
Okay. And
it's not entirely human, at least I don't think it is, and it's not entirely ape. So it's whatever it is, it's an interesting, and I don't want to use the word hybrid, but it's an interesting species that has characteristics of both.
Okay. Mater KB wants to know what was your original personal Bigfoot sighting?
Oh, good Lord. Well, I'll tell you the story. God, I think I've told this thing a zillion times. But I used to live, obviously in my freshman year of college, it was required to live on campus. And I did that. In my sophomore year, the first part of the year, I lived in a little house, a duplex house, that was in Winter Park, Florida, near the railroad tracks on, of all things, Pennsylvania Avenue. But in 6 months after that, because we had 6-month leases down here then, I moved further out because it was cheaper into a new a garden apartment complex that had 2-story apartments that was then out in the sticks on Semoran Boulevard, which is 436 in Orlando. At that time, my God, there was nothing out there but forest and orange groves. It's not at all what it is today. And behind the complex, and surprisingly, I was out there, a couple months ago, and it really hasn't changed a lot other than the parking lot and some covered parking which wasn't there and some other things. They've changed a lot, lighting and everything, but over the years. But you're talking 1975 when I lived out there, and this is 3 years after Disney opened. In any case, I came home one night in the late autumn. I guess it was about 9 o'clock after an evening class, and I stopped at the Publix and picked up some groceries before they closed, and I got into the parking lot and pulled in and got this really weird feeling as I got out of my little MG that I was being watched, but didn't really pay much attention to it, and walked around to the passenger side of the car to get my groceries out. And when I stood up, I saw this thing standing just out of the light on the opposite side of a lighting pole, in the wooded area behind this thing, behind the complex, and went, "Geez, what the heck are you doing here? And what is that?" And that kind of thing. And my legs locked. And finally, after what seemed like an eternity, I realized it wasn't going to charge me, so I slowly started backing up to the stairs going to my second-floor apartment and started up the stairs. Well, it seemed more interested in the trash dumpsters that were over to its left side, my right. And those dumpsters, by the way, are still there, believe it or not. But in any case, it was more interested in that, but as I moved, it kept watching me. By this time, I got to the top of the landing, set the groceries down on the floor, and put my key in the lock, and by the time I turned around, it was gone.
Huh.
And this is one of those things. I know everybody says that they see things happening in slow motion, and there's images burned in their head. I mean, to this day, when somebody talks about the animal, I can see in my head that photograph of the thing standing there.
Right.
So I mean, it made an impression, and no, I didn't smell it.
Right. Okay. All right, Eric. I know you're getting bombarded.
Yeah, they're hot and heavy tonight. I'm telling you. Comes from Jim Footicus. Where do Bigfoots go during hurricanes?
Well, swamp apes apparently weather the storm in any place they can find that's relatively safe, and most likely in the deepest forest they can find because it breaks up the wind. Now, we've had sightings immediately after hurricanes here, most notably Jennifer Ward's sighting, and we've seen, she saw the animal out foraging after the event. So, it may be a mixed bag for them. Certainly they're going to try to find some high ground and a hammock, I would think. But then again, I think they're semi-aquatic, so I don't know that it necessarily bothers them.
All right.
We've had families of swamp apes seen by commercial fishermen, not a couple of guys out there tipping a few, while throwing their line in. And boats of commercial fishermen reporting them out in the Gulf of Mexico, swimming between islands and 10,000 islands.
Yeah.
So, I think they can swim quite well. And I think they use our waterways essentially as their highways to get around.
That's interesting.
Yeah, very. I never thought of it that way. But John Green does talk about the amount of rainfall that's necessary, that seems to relate to sightings. So that might have something to do with the fact that these creatures like water.
Well, it may be, and of course, a lot of animals come out after a rain to drink the fresh rainwater. Even snakes do that. So, that's not an unusual issue, and it's not necessarily something that's weird. And of course, we've had several years of drought here, followed by these massive rainy seasons with some hurricanes and some horrible storms. They're going on now, and there may be some connection to that.
Right.
Okay. Billy, you let me know whenever you get a phone call you want me to stop with the questions. Until then, I'll just keep on rolling. Okay.
Clear.
All right. This one is an interesting question. At least I think it is. Where is it here? What is your opinion on the apparent hostility in the Bigfoot research community? It seems like you can't get the time of day in the field anymore without someone getting roasted alive.
Well, I think there's several things going on. One of which is you've got some crackpot idiots out there who just love to play with people and like to manipulate and try to play one against the other. Lord knows I've run into enough of those. But then you've got others that are hell bent on discrediting anybody who's doing legitimate research because they're trying to exploit the gullible public and the media. In terms of what these animals are and taking them out on expensive expeditions and all kinds of other nonsense. And yes, I know I've been told that certain people think I'm bad for business, and you know what? But there are the same things going on in the paranormal community all over the place. The ghost hunters have been doing it to each other for ages. It's just you got a lot of people who are not. Shall we say, educated in professional conduct, and as a result, they're seeing it as their territory being invaded, as opposed to a scientific pursuit where it's free for everybody to participate if they want to, and throw their stuff up properly to get a good peer review. But what you wind up with is haters coming out of the woodwork trying to spread every bit of disinformation and hatred they possibly can. And that's another group I've got absolutely no tolerance of anymore.
Yeah.
We certainly find enough of them on crypto.com, cryptozoology.com. I've had more war words on that website than anything I got that I can think of, and frankly, I'm getting tired of it.
Yeah, I know what you mean, Scott.
That's why you don't find me on many forums anymore. I just stay away from them.
Yeah. Well, it's little wonder that most of the guys that are doing what I do and writing books and whatnot, they don't subject themselves to it. I like being accessible to the public. I'd like to continue doing that, but frankly, I don't have have time to go back and forth and back and forth and back and forth and back and forth with somebody who's got to get the last word.
Right.
I present the information
right.
and I point them in the right direction. If they don't want to do their homework and their research, don't expect me to do it for you.
Right. And that's one of the main reasons I stay off a lot of the forums as well. Because you're right with that, Scott. They have to have the final word, and no matter what you tell them, you're not going to change their train of thought. So.
Well, they start with an erroneous assumption, and then they continue to apply it to everything you say and do without paying an iota of attention to what you're saying.
Right. Right.
And in many cases, they stick words in your mouth that you never uttered.
Right. It's one thing to share information and to have a discussion, and it's a whole other thing to criticize someone for their opinion or just plain right out ridicule them for what they think or, even what they saw sometimes, So.
Or for that matter, play them so, again, you can sell a DVD or you can get more traffic to your website.
Right. Go ahead, Eric.
Okay. Let's see here. Elusive One wants to know, Scott, what's your thoughts on infrasound?
Well, it works for the elephants. It may very well work for Bigfoot. I haven't heard anything to say that it does, and I haven't heard anything that says that it doesn't.
Okay, that seems to be a widely discussed topic these days, and you're right. They may have the chest cavity and the capacity to put out that sound. That might be causing a lot of the fear and dread that people associate with.
Well, some of the that, for example, I mentioned that feeling that you're being watched. Some of that may be a dichotomy that's set up between your cardinal senses and your innate senses, like due to pheromones, for example. You may, in the hypothalamus, detect that there's something there because you can, for lack of a better way of putting it, sense that it is as a result of the pheromones the animal puts out, and yet your vision or your hearing or your taste, smell, everything else doesn't tell you something's there. So it may set up this weird feeling that you get that there's something there, but there isn't. And one of the things that I think these animals are really good at is they have the pheromone sense that we have lost. And that may be one of the reasons why they don't need the same kind of technology we do. We rely on our technology to heighten our senses, and they may not need it.
Yeah,
for
that's
some
another
very good biological reasons.
That's another discussion we had last week, is the fact that we are so spoiled with television and radio, and we can come in and flick on a light if it's too dark, and all these conveniences that we have that we go out into the woods, and if we lived in the woods all the time like these things do, then our senses would be greater heightened. I mean, it's our senses suck because we have all this stuff.
I mean, and I've got people who constantly tell me I'm crazy because I'll go out in the green swamp in the camper, and I'll stay out all night long by myself. Now, that's not good camping. I don't recommend it, but I'm so comfortable out there, and I know the animal life so well that I'm not worried about it.
Right.
I'm more concerned about stumbling on a group trying to interdict some drugs or something and getting killed by a human than I am by anything that's out there. In terms of the animal life. So but then again, I have a more heightened sense of the outdoors, I think, than the average Joe, and I try to pass that on to my kids, and and frankly, they've all thanked me for it. But then I know families that are so married to the modern world that they'd be completely lost, and in fact don't want to have anything to do with camping. They'd rather stay at the local La Quinta than to be in the campsite at night, contending with the mosquitodactyls that we have down here, and some of the other creepy crawlies that you find outside, and then maybe that's okay. But I think you really kind of need to, and God help us if we have a cometary collision or something that the Chicken Littles of the world are running around saying, the sky is falling, the sky is falling. If you don't have that outdoor sense, you're goner. If something like that happens, I mean, it's all over. They just won't know what to do.
Yep. Okay, Eric, keep on getting it.
From Poison, who asks, since the animals won't let us observe them, how will you think we should trap one, and should we keep it in a zoo or release it?
Oh, good God. Well, first I'd like to prove they're there, and then I'd like to worry about that question. Frankly, well, on the other hand, in terms of poetic justice, I wouldn't mind walking in hand with one of these guys to one of the crypto conferences and say, there you go. But I'm sure that's true of everybody who's in the business. But I'm not so sure that they wouldn't. Not that I buy in. Well, Janice actually asked to be my friend on Facebook yesterday, but not that I buy into Janice and Fox. But I'm not so sure that they wouldn't allow us to associate with them if they became acclimated. You got to remember when Diane Fossey went out to deal with the gorillas, it took her a good 6 months to get to the point that they'd even let her see them.
Right.
So, and she's there every single day. How many Bigfoot hunters do you know that are not weekend warriors and are out there every day of the week?
Right. Well, I tell you what, Scott, if you could find someone who could finance me, I'll be out there every day.
Well, that makes two of us.
Makes three of us.
Two of us. I'll tell you what, we'll set up Count Pangea out there somewhere one of these days if we can if we can find ourselves a Tom Slick. And hopefully we'll be able to solve the riddle. I mean, I certainly wouldn't mind. 10,000 Islands sounds appealing to me. I mean, out of 10,000 islands, there's only 3 inhabited ones. Let's pick one that's really remote.
Yeah. I'm just hoping for a good sugar mama.
Well, sugar mama will do too. I don't care if it's a Tom Slick or a Thomasina Slick, as long as she's got the buckets, or he.
All right, I think you've already answered this, Scott. This comes from Jim Footicus. What is the difference between swamp apes and Bigfoot?
Well, in terms of the nomenclature, the swamp ape originates here in the southeastern United States and the Gulf Coast, whereas the Bigfoot, classic Sasquatch, is a Pacific Northwest creature that is apparently, run across the northern part of the United States. I don't think they're necessarily from the same genus or species. I'm sure they're not the same species. The Bigfoot probably did, as Grover suggested, get here by way of the Beringia land bridge, and you spread around from that. I believe that the swamp ape got here from Europe and the Mediterranean basin, crossing over ice pack and what have you at a much earlier time, and wound up here very much like the Clovis people apparently got here from France. And that they're descended from the Dirapithecus. What the Bigfoot is descended from is, I'm not sure yet. Yes, we did answer that, but there you go. There's just a little more of the story. And, of course, one of the reasons why the evidence is so scant is you also have to remember at the time that all this would have occurred, the water levels or ocean levels were much, much lower, and since they are semi-aquatic species that stays near the water, if not in it, in a swampy environment, what would be evidential to us is now underwater. So it makes it very difficult to do the kind of research necessary to verify all of this.
Right. All right, Eric.
Okay, next one from Spin Dave, and this is a rather interesting question. If it does take place or these creatures start looking at humans as meals, I'm staying out of the woods. Spin Dave wants to know, over the years, Sasquatch must have had some bad seasons in terms of hunger. Humans would be a logical source of food for those creatures in the lean seasons. In light of this, how do we account for Bigfoot's behavior?
Well, let's not, let's not say that humans are incapable of it. The guys in the Andes certainly had a snack on each other. But I'm not so sure that cannibalism is not prevalent. If not some kind of a behavior that these things exhibit, and there is most certainly in Neanderthal, I think it's the Grandalina Homo ancestor, and several other early hominin human relatives where there are butchering marks on the bones indicating that they ate each other. So, you know, if you push something far enough and it gets hungry enough, you'd be surprised what they'll do.
Right.
Okay.
All right, Eric.
From Bill Green, he wants to know, are you thinking about writing a book about the Florida Sasquatches?
I already have. I've been working on it. The biggest problem is the illustrations are, for the most part, not owned by me, and I have been working now for 4 years trying to clear the way with all the illustrative material so that I can publish the book.
Wow. Wow.
And,
Yeah,
I mean,
I'm
it
sure
is
that
heavily
could be a
illustrated.
problem.
Yeah, it is
I'm sure that
heavily
could be.
illustrated. But if I had to redraw every one of the images, I probably couldn't even get it to publication. I couldn't afford to. So I've got to go the hard route and get permission to use the illustrations that I've selected that obviously illustrate the points I make in the book.
Right.
Okay.
Keep going, Eric.
This next question is kind of a general question. It's not really so much directed towards Scott, but I guess this is general for the room itself. Is there any further information on the results from blood and tissue from the fishing cabin collected by Dr. Jeff Meldrum? That comes from VA BF Watcher.
Well, actually, I said it before in another show. I owe Jeff an apology, and I'm going to say it again because I had thought that screwboard thing was something that he condoned, and he didn't. I found that particular episode of Monster Quest I found very disturbing because I would never, ever recommend any kind of collection material or collection device of that type. In as much as I have Charcot-arthropy, which is the result of my diabetes, and I've almost lost my foot over an infection from stepping on a nail or a pin or Lord knows what it was. I wouldn't wish that on anybody, including my big hairy friend. So, but as I understand it, the blood came back as inconclusive. And I may be wrong. It'd be better to ask Jeff that question than me.
Right.
Keep it going.
Okay, the last question in the room for right now comes from Elusive One, which is Abe. He wants to know, have you ever had an aggressive encounter? And if so, can you talk about what took place?
Never. I've heard of them, and most of them are nonsensical. But the only time I have ever heard of a Bigfoot or a swamp ape or any creature of that type becoming violent is when violence was worked on it first.
Right.
In terms of credible stories.
Right.
We've had one here where ostensibly a young man on a camp out was picked up and thrown to the ground by one. But based on the story, it sounds more like they were out there drinking on state land, which is we're boating in here in Florida, and a rather burly, hairy, extremely large, bearded state park ranger came upon them and said, and threw them up against the car.
Right.
So I don't know about the swamp ape attribution there. That was probably something done for the benefit of the parents. And that incident, by the way, is contemporary with my sighting, although it was over in Brooksville and not in Orlando or in the Orlando suburb. So.
And he just added a second part to his question, Eric.
Yep, and that was, have you ever had anything thrown at you?
Yes.
Okay.
You want the long answer?
I'd like to know what you've had thrown at you, because I've had stuff thrown at me before, just as recent as 3 weeks ago.
Well, I was out. I had seen the Animal X episode with Chester Moore and Chris Stevens, and actually one of my students from the cryptozoology class down at the college hooked me up with Chester, saying that I should go take a look and what have you. And I was going out to Texas anyway. Chester had given an award to one of my students. I needed to be there, and then gave me the Smokey Crabtree Award that year. So I used that as an excuse to go out. And Chester and Chris agreed to take me to where the Animal X episode had been filmed, and then to another location later on that night. And Chester and I had some interesting things happen in the big thicket where the episode was filmed. Chris was unable to make it. There was a bad rainstorm that early in the day. And then we headed back to Chester's and then went out later that night to the other location when Chris was able to join us. And it was an interesting area. I've been sworn to secrecy. I'm not going to discuss the exact location, but it was not that far from Chester's home where this was taking place. And there were these moguls. For those of you who ski, you know what a mogul is. On one side, on the left side of this aisleway, if you will, of land and a path that went back to, from the road we were on, to an area where Chester said was cane and cattle, cattle ranch and fruit and other things that, were way back there. And we were going to walk all the way back. And then there was a levee, filled with water on the right-hand side that paralleled this. So there was really only this one aisleway. Now, from the moment we got to the entrance to this thing, I mean, it reeked. I mean, there is no ifs, ands, or buts. I have never smelled anything that rancid. It was like the rear end of a seafood restaurant on a hot summer day in the trash dumps. I mean, it was bad. And again, I'm diabetic. I took my shot and everything, so I'd be fine. It was very, very hot, and we were sweating. Chris had an active infrared scope, and Chester had a passive one. I just bought myself, and I had my hat on. It's one of those wide brim, Aussie type hats, and I didn't have it buttoned up, so it covered my head and then down around my ears and all of that. And we're back there, and there was definitely stuff going on. We couldn't see anything, but we could hear movement. I tried several times to take pictures and never could get a clear picture. And finally, Chester, we're standing with our back to each other so that we can cover three directions, if you will, not expecting anything to come up from the water. And Chester finally says, "Take a look at this." And I look at the scope, and there's this thing moving back and forth between trees, and you can see this big form in that haunting, eerie green. Although every time Chris pointed the active scope with the red infrared in that direction, it hit. So I kind of wonder whether these things can see infrared light. Being largely nocturnal, they probably can. But in any case, so I knew something was there, and I turned around to hand the scope back to Chester. And when I turned around, I got hit in the back of the head. Now, it wasn't a severe thing. It wasn't it was just a twig. But, at first I thought, well, maybe something fell out of the bush, and I looked up, and then I realized that couldn't happen. I had my hat on. It couldn't have hit me where it hit me, and I put my hand back there, and I had a little bit of blood. Not much, just a little. But it was right under the brim. So whatever it was had to come from the ground. It could not have come from the trees. And, what would be throwing something at you?
So it actually must have had a little bit of force to it if it broke.
Oh yeah, I mean it was just to shock me, and when I went whoa, Chris jumped the mile, and Chester's like, what happened? And then I told them, and then at that point we had the conference the next night, and it was about 3 a.m. by then, and we decided to leave, and on the way back out I had a horrendous reaction, but to that stench, because it was even worse than it was when we went in. But in any case, on the way back, Chester said, well, that sick incident is not unique. And I said, what do you mean? And he said, well, that happened to my dad right here in this exact same place when we were out here. And I'm like, whoa. I to this day believe I got beamed by a Bigfoot.
Right.
You got beamed.
Well, and to add to that, too, I mean, that's not unusual for primates. That's a typical primate behavior. Orangutans will throw things at you like that all the time if you're in an area they don't want you to be in and they feel threatened.
Right.
Well, an interesting side note, about 3 or 4 weeks ago, we went to a location in central Pennsylvania, and the first night we were there, the rock throwing wasn't as sporadic. Or I should say was sporadic. They came probably one every 15 or 20 minutes. And the second week we went back, they were 3 to 4 rocks every 15 minutes. They were coming in from both sides of where we were set up. So there was definitely somebody out there or something out there. We didn't see any sign of human out there when we were there, but definitely something behind us and in front of us throwing rocks at us that night. The third time we went out there, nothing happened. There were no rocks or anything thrown that night. So that kind of verified to us that there was something that took place those first 2 nights that was throwing rocks at us.
Yeah, and I wouldn't be surprised. I mean, one of the more interesting things, if you're going to talk about rocks and stuff, that we've had happen on one of our expeditions, again, this is with my students when we went out to do a field study, is there was a very long road going into the area that we worked, or were working at that time. And every time we went down the road, there'd be this enormous rock that would take out your oil pan sitting in the middle of the road. And at first we thought that, maybe it was some equestrians marking a trail or where they went, the old Boy Scout thing. And this persisted. We'd get out of the RV or the car or whatever it was we were driving, the Jeep. We'd move it off the road. And then when we came back, an hour or so later, it'd be right back in the road. And this went on for a couple of days. And, then finally we thought, well, it's got to be the Rangers. It's got to be something like that. And finally the Rangers came by and we asked them, and they said, no, but that goes on around here all the time.
Right.
So the Rangers weren't doing it. So, what animal, let's say Florida panther, a bear, boar, a deer, let's run down the list. What's going to put a rock that size, what could lift a rock that size and put it in the road?
Right.
And nobody knew where we were working, so it couldn't have been a hoaxer.
Now, a bear will move a rock, but only to lift it up to get something out from under it. It won't necessarily move it any great distance.
Well, this one had to be moved 6 feet to be where it was each and every time.
Right.
And a bear, I know they're strong, but they can't pick a rock up like a human can. They don't have an opposable thumb and move it that way.
Right.
I mean, this thing was clearly picked up, and it was moved there and placed there in just a certain way. And if it didn't happen over and over and over again, you'd never even give it a second thought. But it was happening, during the course of 5 days out there, I'm telling you, it had to happen 6 times a day.
Right.
So, interesting,
Yep.
Can't prove anything. We probably should have put a trap cam there, but we didn't really have any we could spare based on what we were doing since it was a teaching session for the kids. But, and if you don't want to believe me, talk to Ken Gearhart. Ken was there with us. And,
Yep.
this was just unbelievable that this
Right.
was going on. And, now, of course, I'm much more sensitive and cognizant of that kind of thing. But I think this was marking some sort of a path where they were supposed to cross. And
Right.
we did have one lead us on a merry chase on one side of the road while the others apparently were on the other side of the road staying out of sight. That happened. I was out with Matt Hoyle doing some photographic sessions, and it was the same spot. And several people that were with us saw this thing, back there, and we chased after it. But boy, I tell you, talk about a wild goose chase.
They can lead you on a wild goose chase, can't they?
Yeah, they certainly can. They're smart. They're very, very smart. And the interesting thing is they seem to know how we're going to react.
Yeah, exactly. Well, we've only got a couple minutes remaining. It's hard to believe that we go through 90 minutes that fast. It's just unbelievable.
Well, that gives us a good excuse to do it again sometime, because I've had a wonderful time with you all. And hopefully we can do it again sometime.
Yeah, and I thank you a lot, because I know, Scott, you stay pretty busy, so I appreciate you taking the time out to come onto the show and, give us your theories and your opinions and the work that you've done. So we appreciate it.
Yeah, that's my pleasure, and I'm glad you were able to have me. And like I said, any time that we can do it, I'll be happy to.
All right. Thank you so much, Scott.
Thank you.
Thanks, Scott. It was nice meeting you.
Take care. Take care,
Thanks.
Eric. Bye-bye.
You too.
Good night, Scott. All right, folks. That does it for the show tonight. JC wants me to pimp my anniversary show for next week. Well, I wish I had something to pimp about. I actually was trying to line up a couple of really, really, really great guests. But I believe both of them have burned out on me. So.
Oh. Tell you what, Billy, I'll be one of your great guests if you need one.
Okay. Well, I would appreciate.
I'm just kidding.
Because I've got I've gotten an answer from one, and the answer was, that I'll just go ahead and I'll put it out there. I had an email communication with Dr. Jane Goodall, and she travels 300 days out of the year, and she just can't make her schedule work to be on the show. So hopefully we can get her on the show. A day that we might have to change a day or something like that, because we'd love to get her on the show. She's just full of a wealth of information.
That would be awesome.
And then, oh my gosh, it really would. We've also been trying to get in touch with Autumn Williams, and my understanding is that she is away from home right now. And I have sent her an email. She hasn't answered me, but I do know that she's not home. She's not at home at this time, so don't know if I'll get that or not. So just want to let everybody know we're going to come up with something good. So thanks y'all for listening, and we hope to see. We're getting ready to go off live. So thank you everybody for tuning in tonight, and we are now no longer streaming. Eric, Now, Eric, do y'all have plans to go back to that site up there in Pennsylvania?
Yeah, right now I'm dealing with some personal issues, as you know of, and hopefully that stuff will clear up here in the next few weeks shortly, because the area that we're going to, we've been there 3 weeks this past month in July and into early August, and 2 of those weeks have been extremely active with wood knocking, something responding to our wood knocks. We haven't heard any vocalizations. We found some very large dog-like tracks. I mean, 4 inches by 4 inches. They're pretty big. And
Right.
We have had the rock throwing incident that occurred 2 weeks in a row. The first time, like I said, it was a little more sporadic than the second time. The second time, we were just being bombarded, and one of the researchers with us actually wore a hard hat to avoid getting hit. But
Wow.
yeah, it was quite an interesting 2 weeks up there. The third weekend that 2 of the researchers went up there, nothing happened. So
Right.
it was quiet, typical sounds, stuff like that. It was
Right.
it was interesting. But yeah, we're hoping to get back up there again. I would like to get you up there with us. I've talked to you about going, and hopefully we can work something out maybe into September sometime.
Yeah, I think I'll be able to find a way coming up there. Whenever the activity occurs out there, Eric, does all the other wildlife get quiet?
It's funny you mention that, because that's the first thing we noticed the first Friday night we were there, is the lack or void of wildlife and animal sounds. It was just deadly quiet, and it was so quiet, if I would have dropped a key on the ground, you would have heard it. And we commented about that all night long. The second night we were out there, same thing. It was so abundantly quiet, no sign of any animals. We almost stepped on a rattlesnake, but so abundantly quiet that it was frightening, to the point where we were like moving at every little sound. The third night that the guys were there, typical wildlife sounds, typical wildlife being seen around the area. So there was definitely something there that scared off the wildlife. I have no doubt about it. What it was, I don't know, but it definitely deserves further investigation and further study. So I want to get you and JC and a couple more people up in this area.
Yeah, that's one thing that I've always found interesting. Just about every time something occurs, it seems like all the other wildlife, including the crickets and everything else, seem to just get silent.
Right,
and I've always found that to be just unbelievably incredible.
Yeah. Well, the first night where we had the sporadic rock throwing, we heard bullfrogs that were communicating back and forth. They weren't doing it the whole night. It was just occasional. The second night where we had those rocks coming in, nothing. Not a sound.
Yep. So it's really weird. It's almost like all the other wildlife can sense, I guess, the presence of whatever's out there. And we kind of joke around about that. It's almost like is it their way of showing respect? Or whatever. Or maybe they don't want to be an hors d'oeuvre or something. I don't know.
I don't know. The strange thing is that this Saturday, getting back up on the mountain in the morning and walking around, it was like a different place, because there were chipmunks and squirrels and birds and
a turkey. I mean, it was just abundant with wildlife and the noises. Everything was alive, like the woods were just flourishing. And the night before, it was like you were standing in a tomb. Absolutely no sound.
Yeah. Yeah.
So I got to get you up there and get JC up there, and we got to get some more folks up there to cover. This area is so huge and so vast. Three of us can't cover all of it. We really can't.
Oh yeah. Yeah, we'll definitely have to do that. And I'm hoping that maybe you will also be able to join us, as you know, in October.
I have it on my calendar. I have cleared my calendar at this point. Unless something drastic happens on that weekend, I will be there.
Cool. Very good. All right. Well, again, Eric, thank you. I know I kind of called you at the last second, and you're always there to bail me out, so I appreciate it.
Oh, my pleasure. Anytime you need a co-host, brother, I'm there for it. Just call me your interim co-host when DB's not available.
All right. Sounds good. All right. And thanks, everyone, for tuning in. We couldn't have a show without all of you, so we really appreciate it. And thank you so much for all the wonderful questions that made the show just fly by. And I'm sure Scott appreciated it as well. So thanks to everyone. Thank you, Eric, and good night, everybody.
Good night.
A legend silently stalks the forest around the world, leaving giant man-like footprints in its wake. Skeptics scoff, while the true believers search for the answers, and those who have seen it will never forget. Monday nights, 9 p.m. Eastern, Blog Talk Radio. Billy Willard and the Blog Squatcher present Sasquatch Watch Radio. Your hosts Billy Willard and D.B. Donlin bring you 60 minutes of the latest news and information, newly discovered evidence, and interviews with those searching for the truth and those who have seen it. Do you believe? Want to know the truth? It's out there waiting. Monday nights, 9 p.m., Blog Talk Radio. Sasquatch Watch Radio. Sit down, hold on tight, get ready, because it is about to go down. blogtalkradio.com/Sasquatch Watch Radio.
Why?
Why? If you have T-Mobile 5G home internet, you might be hearing this
Why?
a lot.
Why?
Every time your internet slows down during the busiest hours.
Why?
Why?
Because your network gives priority to cell phone users.
Why?
Good question. Why not switch to Cox Internet with 2 times faster download speeds than T-Mobile 5G home internet during peak hours?
Okay.
Stop the whys and visit cox.com/5G home for details. T-Mobile prioritizes certain T-Mobile phone users over home internet users during times of congestion.
The United States Border Patrol has exciting and rewarding career opportunities with the nation's largest law enforcement organization. Border Patrol agents enjoy great pay, outstanding federal benefits, and up to $20,000 in recruitment incentives for newly appointed agents. If you are looking for a way to serve something greater than yourself, consider the United States Border Patrol. Learn more online at cbp.gov/careers/USBP. That's cbp.gov/careers/USBP.